The air inside Titan Corp's headquarters was thick with tension. The glass walls reflected the city lights, but inside, the room was dark, only the dim glow of a security panel flickered in the corner. A man, dressed in a sleek black suit, stepped inside without a sound. Nobody knew him. At least, that's what he hoped. He walked with confidence, but every step was a gamble. His heart pounded against his ribs, but on the surface, he was calm, calmer than he had ever been. The man standing in that office wasn't an intruder. He wasn't here to steal secrets. He was the real CEO. But nobody knew that. A thin mask of biosilicone covered his face, altering his features. His voice had been modified. His fingerprints erased. His entire identity was stripped away, and now, he stood here disguised as his own rival, the man everyone believed was his biggest enemy. The mission? Find out who had betrayed him. And the first person he had to face was her. He turned, his eyes landing on the one person he had trusted for years, his secretary. She was seated at her desk, eyes locked onto the screen, fingers typing away. Her expression was unreadable. She had worked for him for years, known every detail of his life, handled every private document. If anyone had access to the secrets of his empire, it was her. And yet, here she was, working inside Titan Corp, the enemy's headquarters. Had she really betrayed him? Or was there something more dangerous hiding beneath the surface? He took a slow breath. If she recognized him, the entire mission would fall apart. If she had already turned against him, he might not make it out of this building alive. As he stepped forward, his voice, now deep and unfamiliar, broke the silence. "You're working late." She looked up. Her eyes met his. And in that moment, he saw something he didn't expect. Fear. Not of him, but of something else. Something bigger. Something he wasn't prepared for. 2 weeks earlier. The CEO sat in his private office, the skyline stretching beyond the glass windows. His empire stood tall, unshaken. Yet, inside these walls, someone was tearing it apart from within. His eyes scanned the confidential report spread across his desk. Leaks. Sensitive company data had been making its way into the hands of Titan Corporation somehow. Their competitor was always one step ahead. It was no coincidence. Someone inside his company was selling him out. And the most unsettling part? All evidence pointed to his secretary. He refused to believe it. She was loyal. She had been with him for years. She had never given him a reason to doubt her. But the reports didn't lie. Every leak, every stolen file, every suspicious transaction, it all traced back to her workstation. "Sir, what do you want me to do?" his head of security asked. He exhaled slowly, fingers tightening around the edge of the paper. If he confronted her directly, she could deny everything. If he fired her, he might never know the truth. And if he was wrong, he'd be destroying the career of someone innocent. That's when the idea came to him. A test. "I want to go inside Titan Corp," he said, his voice calm but firm. The security officer frowned. "Sir, that's dangerous. You can't just walk into enemy territory." "Not as myself," he replied. A plan formed in his mind, a dangerous, risky plan. If someone was betraying him, he needed to catch them in the act. And the only way to do that was to become someone else. Within days, a team of experts was working in secret. A full disguise, biosilicone technology, voice modifications, a new identity. He wouldn't just pretend to be his rival. He would become him. Now, standing inside Titan Corp headquarters, the mission had officially begun. And there, in front of him, was his secretary. She looked up, unaware of who she was really looking at. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard. There was hesitation in her expression. Guilt? Fear? Or something else? The CEO had to play his role perfectly. If she was really working against him, this moment could change everything. "You're working late," he repeated, keeping his voice steady. She blinked, then nodded. "Yes. There was an urgent report I had to send." His heart clenched. An urgent report? Was she leaking his company's secrets right now? "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, stepping closer. Her hand hovered over the mouse. A moment of hesitation. And then, she clicked the screen off. His pulse quickened. What was she hiding? Was she really a traitor? Or was something much bigger at play? The CEO, hidden behind the mask of his rival, felt his pulse quicken as the screen went dark. The subtle click of the monitor shutting off echoed in the silence between them. Why had she hidden it? If she was truly innocent, she had no reason to be nervous. But if she was the traitor, she had just revealed her guilt. He forced a casual smile, stepping closer to her desk. "Busy night, huh?" She straightened in her chair, her posture a little too stiff. "Yeah, always is," she replied. He studied her carefully. Her voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of unease, like she wasn't sure how much to say. He glanced at the monitor, now black. "That report you were sending. What was it about?" For a brief second, she hesitated. Just a second too long. "Just financial projections," she said quickly. "Nothing major." A lie. He had spent years studying people, reading their expressions, their body language. She was hiding something. He took a slow breath. He had to be careful, too much pressure, and she'd suspect something was wrong. Too little, and he'd never get the truth. "Interesting," he said smoothly, taking a seat across from her. "I heard your last employer had some security concerns." She stiffened. "Excuse me?" He leaned in slightly, watching her reaction. "I mean, they suffered some unfortunate leaks, didn't they?" Her lips parted, and for the first time, he saw real fear in her eyes. This wasn't the reaction of someone caught. This was the reaction of someone trapped. She wasn't just hiding something. She was scared. His mind raced. If she was the one leaking information, why was she afraid? Who was she afraid of? "Look," he said, softening his tone, "you don't have to tell me anything. But if there's something going on, maybe I can help." Her fingers curled slightly, nails pressing into her palm. For a moment, she looked like she might say something. But then, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, and in an instant, her expression changed. Her face paled, her hands trembling just slightly as she turned her phone face down. He caught a glimpse of the name on the screen before she hit it. A Titan Corp executive. His blood ran cold. Something wasn't right. "Sorry," she said quickly, standing up. "I have to go." Before he could stop her, she was gone. He sat there for a moment, staring at the dark screen she had shut off. She was hiding something. That was clear now. But the bigger question was, who was pulling the strings? And why did she look so terrified? The CEO sat in the dimly lit office, his fingers tapping against the desk. His mind was racing. She was hiding something, but was she a traitor or a pawn? One thing was certain, she was afraid. But afraid of what? Or who? If he confronted her now, she might shut down completely. No, he needed proof. He decided to set a trap. The next morning, he carefully planted false information into the system. A fake report, one that only an insider could access. If the leak reached Titan Corp, he'd have his answer. And there was only one way to know for sure. He needed to see if she would take the bait. That night, he watched from a hidden security feed. The office was nearly empty, the hall's dark. But there she was, his secretary, sitting at her desk, eyes fixed on her screen. She hesitated, staring at the document he had planted. For a moment, it seemed like she wouldn't open it. Then, she clicked. His stomach tightened. She scrolled through the file, scanning the contents. And then, she did nothing. She didn't copy it. She didn't forward it. She just sat there. Her hand hovered over the mouse, her breathing slow and shaky. Then she closed the document. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. If she was the leak, why didn't she send it? And then something happened that made his blood run cold. She reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a small, hidden recording device. His heart pounded as she placed it carefully under her keyboard, as if she was trying to catch someone. That's when he realized the truth. She wasn't leaking secrets. She was trying to find out who was. His entire world shifted in that moment. He had come here to catch a traitor. But instead, he had found an ally. As she got up to leave, her phone buzzed again. He couldn't see the name this time, but the way her hands clenched, the fear in her eyes, it was clear. Someone was controlling her. Someone dangerous. And if she was playing both sides, she might be in more danger than she realized. The CEO sat in silence, staring at the security feed. His mind raced. She wasn't the traitor. She was hunting the traitor. For weeks, he had been convinced that she was the one leaking secrets. But now, seeing that hidden recording device under her keyboard, the hesitation in her movements, it all made sense. She wasn't working against him. She was trapped in something much worse. The next day, he decided to push further. He walked into the office in his disguise, keeping his expression neutral. His secretary sat at her desk, her face calm, but her hands told another story. Her fingers tapped nervously on the desk. He glanced at the hidden recording device. It was still there. She was playing a dangerous game. He leaned in slightly, keeping his voice low. Long night? She looked up, forcing a polite smile. Something like that. She was lying. He could see it in the way she refused to meet his eyes. That evening, he waited. He needed to see what she was really up to. Hours passed. The office emptied. And then, just as he expected, she returned. She sat down, glancing around nervously. Then, with shaky hands, she removed the recording device from under the keyboard. She pressed play. A distorted voice filled the air. You have one job. Keep feeding them the information. If you stop, you know what happens. The CEO's breath caught in his throat. She was being blackmailed. The voice continued, cold and emotionless. I don't care if you're scared. I don't care if you're hesitating. If I don't get what I need, you know who will pay the price. The message ended. She sat there, staring at the screen, hands trembling. Then she did something unexpected. She buried her face in her hands. And she started crying. The CEO clenched his fists. She wasn't betraying him. She was being forced to. For the first time, he saw the truth. She was in deep trouble. Someone powerful inside Titan Corp, was using her. And now, he wasn't just here to find a traitor. He was here to save her. The CEO had spent years mastering control over his business, his employees, his emotions. But tonight, as he stood in the shadows of the office, watching his secretary tremble under the weight of the threat against her, he felt something unfamiliar. Anger. Not at her. At whoever was doing this to her. She wasn't the traitor. She was a pawn in someone else's game. And the way she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, she was at her breaking point. He had to act. Moments later, he stepped forward. He knew he was still in disguise, but this wasn't just a business move anymore. This was personal. "Rough night?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. She flinched, quickly wiping her eyes. Just tired. Long day." A lie. She was scared. The CEO didn't respond right away. He let the silence settle, watching her closely. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "If you needed help, would you take it?" Her breath hitched. For the first time, she truly looked at him. "I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. "Yes, you do," he thought. "I mean," he said slowly, "if you had a choice. If you could stop all of this, would you?" Her hands clenched. He saw the conflict in her eyes, fear, hesitation, but also something else. Hope. She swallowed hard. "Why do you care?" "Because I know who you really are. Because I should have trusted you. Because I'm the man you think you're betraying, and I won't let them use you." But he couldn't say any of that. "So instead," he said, "maybe I don't like seeing people being controlled." She hesitated. He could see her battling with herself. Could she trust him? Could she take the risk? Then, just for a second, she almost spoke. But before she could, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, her face draining of color as she read the message. Whatever was on that screen terrified her. Without a word, she grabbed her bag and bolted out of the office. The CEO clenched his fists. Time was running out. She was too scared to talk. But soon, she wouldn't have a choice. Because whoever was controlling her, was about to make their next move. The CEO didn't hesitate. As soon as she ran out of the office, he followed. She moved fast, weaving through the darkened halls, her phone gripped tightly in her trembling hands. Whatever message she had received, it had shaken her to her core. He kept his distance, careful not to alert her. But then she did something unexpected. Instead of heading for the elevator, she turned sharply toward the emergency exit. The stairwell. His pulse quickened. She was running. But from what? She pushed through the heavy door, taking the stairs two at a time. He followed, his footsteps light, his mind racing. Was she going to meet someone? Was she planning to hand off more information? Or was she running for her life? Suddenly, she stopped. The CEO pressed himself against the wall just before she turned her head, glancing behind her. She knew she was being followed. Her breathing was sharp and uneven. Then, gripping her phone, she tapped the screen, calling someone. He listened. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't understand, they're getting too close. He's getting too close." His heart pounded. Who was she talking about? Him? The real CEO? Or the people blackmailing her? The voice on the other end responded, but he couldn't make out the words. She shook her head. "No, you don't get it. I think he knows. I think he's on to me." A pause. Then, she squeezed her eyes shut. "I never wanted this." For the first time, her voice cracked. The CEO's chest tightened. This was it. The moment of truth. Was she about to betray him, or save him? She took a shaky breath. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll do it. But after this, I'm done. No more." Then, without warning, she ran. The CEO knew he had no time to waste. He followed her out of the stairwell, moving quickly through the shadows. She turned a corner, rushing toward an empty hallway, and that's when he saw it, a figure waiting for her. A tall man in a black suit. Titan Corp. She stopped in front of him, looking over her shoulder one last time. Then, she handed him a flash drive. His stomach dropped. Had she just betrayed him? Or was this part of something bigger? The man nodded, slipping the drive into his pocket. Then, he said something that made the CEO's blood run cold. You did the right thing. The boss will be pleased. He'll call you when it's done. The boss? Who was pulling the strings? Before he could think, the Titan Corp man turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. The secretary stood frozen, staring at the floor, her fists clenched. She looked broken. The CEO stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You just made a choice. She gasped, spinning around. And when she saw him, her eyes filled with pure terror. The moment their eyes met, she froze. For a second, neither of them moved. The CEO, still disguised, watched as her breathing became shallow, her fingers trembling at her sides. She wasn't just scared. She was panicked. You. Her voice was barely a whisper. She took a step back, glancing toward the exit as if considering running again. But it was too late. He had seen everything. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. You just handed over that drive. She didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly. Was that the plan all along? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she didn't know what to say. She had been caught. But was she truly a traitor? Or had she just been pushed to her limits? She swallowed hard. You don't understand, she said, her voice shaking. He arched a brow. Then make me understand. Her fists clenched. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, he countered. You just made yours. Her eyes darkened. And what choice did I have? She snapped, her voice breaking. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be their puppet? The CEO stayed silent, watching her closely. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. They have my brother. His jaw tightened. She let out a bitter laugh. They took him months ago. I don't even know where he is. The only thing keeping him alive is me doing what they say. Everything clicked into place. The hesitations. The fear. The hidden recording device. She hadn't been playing both sides. She was trying to survive. His mind raced. He had come here to expose a traitor. Instead, he had walked into a hostage situation. Titan Corp wasn't just stealing his company's secrets. They were using her as leverage. And now, she was at her breaking point. If I stop, she whispered, looking at him with desperate eyes, they'll kill him. The CEO inhaled deeply. He had been wrong about her. She wasn't the enemy. But there was still one problem. She had just handed over that flash drive. And whatever was on it, could destroy him. Where is he? The CEO asked. She shook her head. I don't know. They don't tell me anything. Then we'll find out. She frowned. What? He took another step forward, his voice low and steady. You're done playing their game. She let out a breathless laugh. You don't get it. I can't just walk away. You don't have to, he said. But you can choose what happens next. Her brows furrowed. He leaned in slightly. Do you want your brother back? Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded without hesitation. Then listen to me, he said, his voice sharp and commanding. We do this my way now. She swallowed hard. And then, for the first time since this all began, she looked like she was ready to fight back. The CEO had spent years making decisions that shaped an empire. But this? This was a different kind of decision. The woman standing before him wasn't his enemy. She was a victim. And now, she was his ally. But they had no time. The flash drive was already in Titan Corp's hands. Whatever was on it, it was dangerous. And her brother? He was still out there. Still a hostage. There was only one move left to play. The final plan. The CEO glanced at her. I need you to do exactly as I say. She wiped the tears from her eyes, her breathing still shaky. But she nodded. I'm listening. First, he said, we get your brother back. Then, we take Titan Corp down. A flicker of hope crossed her face. How? The CEO smirked. By giving them exactly what they want. She blinked. But, I already gave them the flash drive. I know. His eyes darkened. That's why we use it against them. The final betrayal, this time, against Titan Corp. With her help, the CEO traced the chain of commands. Every message she had received, every demand, every location, it all pointed back to one man. The real mastermind behind Titan Corp's operation. And the moment they had a name, the CEO made his move. He contacted Titan Corp himself. His voice was steady, controlled. I have something better than what's on that drive. There was silence on the other end. Then, a low chuckle. You're bold. You have no idea, the CEO replied smoothly. A deal was struck. A meeting was arranged. The final showdown. The CEO arrived at the meeting place, a dark, abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Titan Corp's men were waiting. And in the middle of the room, tied to a chair, her brother. His face was bruised, but he was alive. The CEO's jaw clenched. They had done this to an innocent person just to get to him. One of Titan Corp's executives stepped forward. Where's the data? The CEO smirked. You'll get it. But first, you let him go. The man chuckled. You're not in a position to make demands. The CEO didn't even flinch. Oh, I think I am. And then, he pressed a button on his phone. Suddenly, every screen in the warehouse lit up. Security footage. Recordings. Everything. The CEO had leaked their own operation to the public. Bank records. Bribery transactions. Secret blackmail logs. Every illegal move Titan Corp had made, was now exposed. You wanted information, the CEO said coldly. Now the whole world has it. The executive's face paled. The men holding her brother exchanged nervous glances. They knew they had lost. And then, sirens blared in the distance. The CEO smirked. Looks like you've got company. Titan Corp's men scattered. Her brother was freed. And as the CEO and his secretary stepped out into the night, the weight of everything lifted. It was over. The life lesson. She turned to him, eyes filled with gratitude. You saved us. He shook his head. No. You saved yourself. She had made her choice. She had chosen to fight back. And in the end, loyalty wasn't about fear, it was about courage. She had been forced into a nightmare. But in the end, she chose the right side. The CEO looked at the city lights in the distance. This wasn't just a corporate war. It was a battle of trust, deception, and power. And tonight? The right side had won.